What's your hood look like? Can you walk your dog at 5 p.m.? Do your neighbors all have jobs? Can you leave your Amazon crap out front while you're on vacation? Or is it bad, like this, where you hear gunshots during breakfast, where your neighbors are on crack, where your teenager gets carjacked on the way to her friend's house? This, my friends, is what we're going to talk about today. Bad neighborhoods like this are sadly becoming a growing problem in many of our American cities. It's neighborhoods like this that have people fleeing big cities for good. There's many reasons why we have such terrible hoods: drug use, gangs, generational poverty, lazy people making excuses. But there's lots of good, hardworking people in the bad hoods too, which is sad because they're stuck there, or so they say. A lot of the reasons we have bad neighborhoods like this is because of decisions made at the higher level of government. But that's another video entirely. In this video, we're going to take a cruise through some of the worst neighborhoods in the country and talk about why they're bad. Some are going to be neighborhoods you've heard about, and there might be some which are unknown to you. Of course, many of you are going to say, you should see my neighborhood. My neighbors are total druggy, crazy losers. This place is a disaster. Why didn't you talk about where I live? Well, that's because I only measured neighborhoods with 10,000 people or more. So your little ghetto hood didn't make the cut because you're too small. The stats I used were poverty, crime, and housing mostly. And to be honest, there's going to be neighborhoods worse than the ones I'm going to highlight. Many don't report crime correctly. What we're going to talk about are the worst parts of the worst cities. It's not exact, but it's close. What do you know? We're in Chicago. That's not a surprise. But this isn't just any part of Chicago. This is the south side of Chicago, and specifically Englewood. If you live in the Chicago area, you know Englewood well. It's a place where people shoot at each other all the time. Even the police get shot at. The data ranked Englewood very high because of crime, poverty, and jobless rates mostly. Englewood has 28,000 people, and it ranks first on this list for unemployment. 20% of Englewood doesn't work or hasn't worked in a long time. That's a lot, considering there's plenty of people hiring in Chicago. I mean, there's no excuse for not having a job here. Because a big part of Englewood's on welfare, it's the third poorest of all neighborhoods in the nation with more than 10,000 people, where folks here earn about $500 a week. That's basically fast food pay. Crime-wise, this is the 9th most violent hood in the nation. Yeah, believe it or not, there's way more violent places than just Englewood. 2 other South Side Chicago hoods are actually more dangerous than Englewood statistically, and those are West Garfield Park and East Garfield Park. Yeah, you guys, we're talking about you over there. Most of the trouble here in Englewood's because of drugs and a lack of prosecution at the county level. I was just there a month ago. This is my footage. Here's what one former Chicago police officer had to say about the South Side, and Englewood in particular. Yeah, so just tell me what the mentality is on the south side of Chicago, particularly some of these bad areas like Englewood.
So what I came to realize, working the area, knowing the area every day, day in and day out, was that there wasn't a respect for human life. There's no foresight to the next day. It's always in the moment. Instant gratification, no problem. Critical problem solving skills in the moment. You have an argument with somebody, the first thing you do is reach for a gun. You lean on someone's car and they see you and they don't like it. It's handled violence, and that's part of the culture, and it's generally accepted. And then when the police come around to try to help out or solve anything, nobody wants to communicate. The community literally embraces criminality, and they don't care about law and order. Depending on where you live, especially in Englewood, you're part of a certain... the Chicago gangs are kind of notorious in a sense that everybody knows there's gangs, but unless you're there, you don't really know what that's about. Each block is, in a sense, its own gang. When somebody checks you on the south side, they say, where you from? They want to know what block are you from? What gang faction are you? Mm-hmm. It's block by block, and they go to war against each other. It's they sell narcotics provided to them by the cartels, and that's really the fuel for all of this is narcotics, and a culture that doesn't really respect human life.
So when I drive through the neighborhood, just some white dude with a camera, how dangerous was that for me?
It was dangerous. I remember watching your videos and thinking, holy shit. And you driving around, if you had some kind of apparatus recording, driving through these neighborhoods, that you're just waiting to be carjacked.
There's a lot more of that later in the video, but we have to move on. Now, if you've ever been to Philadelphia before, you'd know it to be a very run-down place in many areas. The west side of Philadelphia is nice and safe, but there's parts of the north end that are outright terrible. One such neighborhood is the Philadelphia neighborhood called Nicetown-Tioga. It's certainly not nice here. Statistically, this is the 14th poorest neighborhood in the country and the 25th cheapest, meaning homes are the 25th lowest of more than 800 neighborhoods I measured. The average home price here is about $20,000. You can buy this plot of land for $9,000. Does this look like somewhere you'd invest in, though? Probably not. And that's the problem with neighborhoods like this. They've been neglected and forgotten about, and the poor folks who live here face living in this reality every day. Who would come in and open up a small business or invest in affordable housing here? Now, crime-wise, this is only the 33rd most dangerous neighborhood in the country, if you can believe it or not, when you measure violent and property crimes. But for the 17,000 people who live here, they face the 13th highest number of violent property crimes per capita. Not too long ago, there was a big gun battle here and 6 cops were shot. There's still bullet holes in homes, and that was 2 years ago. Today, residents complain there's no police presence here unless there's something drastically wrong, and there's always something drastically wrong here in Nicetown-Tioga. And the cancer mortality rates are far higher here than in less impoverished sections of the city too, and that is just so sad. In the 1800s, this part of Philadelphia was dotted with farms and swampland, and farming immigrants from Europe made this place home. Later in the 1960s, there was a big influx of blue-collar African American and Puerto Rican families who were trying to escape the poverty and discrimination in the South. At one point, this neighborhood was lively with festivals. Then, rioting in the 60s helped jumpstart this neighborhood's decline. A loss of blue-collar jobs furthered this neighborhood's demise. It's really sad. Now we're going to head out west for a bit as we explore another terrible neighborhood, Sunnyside in Houston. This neighborhood's located on the city's south-central fringes, about 10 miles from downtown proper. Now, this is the most dangerous part in the whole state of Texas, and that's saying a lot. It's also the 6th most dangerous neighborhood in all of America, where people have a 1 in 6 chance of being the victim of a crime every year. That's somebody from every other house. One older resident who still comes back to Sunnyside to take care of his mother says, the crime here is a reality he faces every day. A lot of people try to protect the older people from crime, he says, but the new gang members, they're ruthless. These young boys are talented. I see them playing hoops, but they have no destination, he says. I don't think they believe they'll ever get out of Sunnyside. They have no hope and no ambition. What the hell? Sunnyside's one of Houston's oldest historically black communities. It was founded in 1912 exclusively for black families when race-based deed restrictions were common. This neighborhood's been trying to redefine itself for decades and has countered the economic struggles and policy changes that are working against it. In 10 years alone, from 2008 to 2018, this community lost 200 local businesses. A couple years ago, most of who remained in Sunnyside were renters after years of what one report said was a policy by the city of Houston to limit where poor minorities could buy a home. What the hell? People who live here say they don't think political leaders even care about this terrible neighborhood, which has high poverty, alarming crime rates, underperforming schools, and deteriorating housing. One resident says she thinks people ignore the problems in Sunnyside because it's a black community. They look at us like we're trash, she says, like garbage. So if you look at somebody like garbage, you're going to treat them like garbage. I mean, she's kind of right. This was literally a dump site for the city of Houston back in the day. And even today, residents have high rates of sickness and asthma. It's also a food desert here. They've talked about gentrifying this neighborhood and bringing life back to it, but people here still complain that they lack basic services and they want change. Hopefully, they get it. Now, Atlanta's been in the headlines a lot lately because of a recent spike in shootings, and there's no worse neighborhood in Atlanta than in Vine City, located just west of downtown, which saw a major facelift when Atlanta hosted the Olympics in 1996. Vine City is where a lot of the crime in Atlanta happens, and as you can see, there's blocks and blocks where there's abandoned buildings which are used for squatters or where drug-dealing gangs set up shop. About 1 in 3 homes here remains vacant, though that number's dropping because the city's investing in knocking buildings down from time to time. This place has been a disaster for decades now. Even MLK himself lived in this neighborhood for a while, and he protested the slum conditions that existed going back all the way into the 60s. This neighborhood's full of vacant lots, decaying or abandoned apartment buildings, and yards piled with trash. Bleak doesn't describe it well, but third world comes to mind in some places. Local leaders here say it'll take $45 million to bring this struggling neighborhood up to par so it's livable again. Less than 40% of residents here are employed, and more than half the families here collect welfare. Somebody in the city even had the bright idea to fix up some of these homes and let cops live in them for free. Well, that didn't work because cops didn't want to live here. One resident said, "Vine City's depressing to live in. Watching these young people destroy themselves, drugs, no school, they don't work, they don't try to learn anything. They probably think that Obama's white." What the? Anyways, homes here are about $100,000, but would you want to invest in this place?
I would never live in a neighborhood like this. Do they even have a Publix?
You know what, Karen Mappy? You're out of touch with reality. Maybe you should drive through some of these hoods and realize that you have a good life.
I don't know. I don't think I could ever live here either. I think I saw a crackhead back there.
Crackhead? That's mean. You probably did, though. But I agree, Atlanta needs to get its stuff figured out. This part of town's way too close to downtown to entice a lot of people to come here to watch a game or check out many of the things to do in Atlanta. It's actually kind of shocking that an area so big can exist so close to downtown in the biggest city in the South, right? Now, Cleveland's really trying to fix itself up, at least in the downtown area. But there are large parts on this city's east side that are in disaster territory. The worst of Cleveland's neighborhoods, and our 6th worst hood in America, is the central neighborhood here, just a few miles from downtown. This is one of Cleveland's oldest neighborhoods, and it was once home to hardworking European immigrants. Then in the 1920s, blacks began moving up here from the southern states during what was called the Great Migration. Then the Great Depression happened in the 1920s, and Ohio established the nation's first ever public housing projects here in East Cleveland. Over time, the hardworking black population here saw a loss of a bunch of jobs, and people fled. At one point, Cleveland's central neighborhood had 70,000 people, and now the population's down to only 12,000. It's the poorest part of Cleveland, and one of the poorest neighborhoods in the nation, too. 1 in 4 residents here doesn't work. There are certain parts of Cleveland that are considered no-go zones even during the day. Central is one of them. One city councilman said of this neighborhood, "It's like war numbers. People are shooting and they don't even care who they hit. They get into an argument and right away the guns come out." However, they are gentrifying neighborhoods all over this part of Cleveland, so if the crime can come down, which it probably won't, this won't be the worst place you can live. Many people who don't live in California have never heard of Stockton before. But this large city in California's Central Valley has become a terrible place for crime and poverty. There's a big neighborhood on the city's east side where things are outright horrible. Stockton's Park neighborhood is home to 26,000 people. This is the part of the state where most of California's farmland is, but 1 in 10 people here still doesn't work. Part of that's because there's a drought here and there's less need for farm workers, but a lot of that's due to laziness and generational poverty. This is actually the 10th most dangerous neighborhood in the country when you measure both property and violent crimes. But of course it's California, so the average home here is going to be about $300,000 if you can believe it. The average Stockton resident makes about $20,000 a year, so there's a lot of poverty in this part of Stockton, and a lot of homeless people who steal for drugs. One Park neighborhood resident had this to say, "I see an alarming number of homelessness, crime, vagrancy, and rudeness. I see people throw garbage out their car windows as well as in parking lots. What I see is people who don't really care." Another resident says, "Stockton, California's ghetto. It's full of low-life, useless criminal scumbags that destroy personal property. It harbors a large population of bums and homeless, not to mention gang-related individuals, and Stockton filed for bankruptcy." Some other Stockton guy said, this place has turned into a cesspool of crime, hate, and hopelessness, and that is just a shame. Stockton was once called the most miserable city in America. If Park is the worst part of Stockton, and that's saying something about Park. Now we're going to leave the western U.S. for good now, thank God, as we head to the south for a bit. Of course, we know Memphis, Tennessee as being a terrible place for crime and poverty. We have 2 neighborhoods coming up that are in Memphis. The first neighborhood we're going to visit is the Fraser neighborhood of Memphis, located on the city's far northern fringes. This neighborhood's home to about 34,000 people, and things are really bleak here, sadly. It ranks as the 12th poorest neighborhood in the nation, where people hover at the poverty line every year. A lot of that's because folks just don't work. 12% of the population's jobless. Fraser also has the nation's 12th lowest home prices, and you can certainly understand why. A home here sells for about $60K on average. This one here is just a tad over that. Not much to look at. Crime here is terrible, but it's not even the worst in Memphis. We're going to see a neighborhood that's even more dangerous. This part of Memphis has been economically depressed ever since Firestone and International Harvester closed in the early 80s. Today, this part of town's riddled with abandoned homes and apartments. Sadly, in Memphis, as areas like this go into further decline, the city just leaves them to rot while the population just moves east. We're not going too far for our third worst neighborhood in America. Actually, we're just going 18.7 miles to a neighborhood on Memphis's southeast side called Parkway Village. Now, this is where crime is a huge problem. This is the most dangerous part of Memphis, where you have a 1 in 36 chance of being raped, attacked, or murdered. Just wow, people. That's an astounding 627% higher than the national average. And Memphis is pretty much the most dangerous place in the nation, meaning this is the most dangerous part in just about the most dangerous place in the nation, folks. Look at this. Just the other day, there was a major shootout where a bunch of people were just walking around the neighborhood, just shooting their guns like they were kids in a water gun fight, right in the middle of the day. If I was a cop in Memphis, I would probably retire. I don't need to risk my life or ruin this pretty face. That's right, super gay cop. No need for you to risk your life. I mean, we are paying you to protect people, but I'm hearing that over and over again from lots of brave police officers. They're just sick of the chaos, just like you are. Not that you're brave or anything. Hey! You had an interesting thing to say where you said Memphis is a real shithole with a heart of gold.
Yeah.
And I was curious to know what you meant by that.
Everyone's real sweet there, but the crime was extraordinary. And I don't come from a privileged background, so it's not as if I'm used to living in affluent areas. But I lived in Midtown, which isn't really a bad area for Memphis. But the interesting thing about Midtown is you can go 2 blocks and it's terrifying. And then you can go 3 blocks and you're in Central Gardens and it's very fancy. So, I mean, that's interesting. But the crime is extraordinary in Memphis. It's such a dichotomy because everyone was so sweet and yet there is such high crime.
I'm on right now with Jose Rodriguez from Southern Life, and you guys may recognize him from his YouTube channel. He does a lot of videos. He drives around hoods down in the southern part of the country, and since we're talking about some bad neighborhoods down and some of them in the south, I figured I'd see if Jose wanted to tell us a little bit about a few of the areas, because he's actually been really close to there. So Jose, you were just down in the south. 3 of them are in places you've been recently. 2 are in Memphis. 1 is in Jackson. Can you give people an idea on what it's like in the Memphis area? You were just in a neighborhood right by some of these places I'm talking about. How bad is it? What's it like there in those Memphis neighborhoods?
But, for Memphis, for being a city the size of Memphis, I mean, like a city that big with that much population, there should be new buildings going up. There should be roads in good conditions. Memphis, it's actually in worse condition than Montgomery, Alabama, or Jackson. It is just a city that big shouldn't be in that condition.
Why do you think it's so terrible in Memphis?
I mean, I don't know exactly what the people that live there might have a better idea, and even they may not know what's going on there. But there's places where people work to build their community and make them better, and there's places where there's crime has you want to live in a place where people, if there's a crime element, it gets handled. But if the law enforcement's afraid to tackle these problems in their communities, then those criminals, they have a free reign to do whatever they want. If law enforcement gets paid a miserable salary, they're not going to risk their lives, to protect the people in the communities, because they feel they can just give parking tickets or speeding tickets, and they're not risking their lives doing that. But you can tell though that their neighborhoods are clicking up. Like if you drive around a street twice, by the second time you drive around that neighborhood and they don't know who you are, somebody's going to follow you. You can't just drive around the neighborhood twice if you're not from there. They're going to follow you.
Yeah, and I know you've been followed a lot.
I mean, we've had people with weapons and stuff. I mean, it's terrifying. And Memphis is weird because they are like mansions in the middle of the city. Like there's neighborhoods that are, this neighborhood here is these like old Victorian looking, like palaces from like, antebellum or whatever. And then like the next block over, it's straight up, hood. So it's very contrasty. Memphis is like a giant Montgomery. You've been to Montgomery? Imagine Memphis being like a 10 times bigger Montgomery.
Yeah. Thank God we're leaving Memphis for good. It's time to head to Jackson, Mississippi, which is even worse in some regards. So there's a neighborhood in Jackson called Citizen Southwest. It's kind of a large area in Jackson's, southwest side. There's only 16,000 people here, but it's bad enough to make it a truly terrible place to live. This neighborhood ranks 5th for crime in the country and has the 3rd highest property crime rate in the country. Crime, F. Employment, F. Schools, F. At least it's cheap. I mean, homes here are crazy low. They average $65,000 each, but you can find them much, much lower, and that's not a good sign, is it? This one here is selling for $16,000. It was $17,000, but as you can imagine, there wasn't much interest. Jackson's just a bad place to live right now overall. And if this is the worst part of Jackson, you know it's bad. This part of town's plagued by gangs and drugs and poverty. We've heard it all before. And what neighborhood is even worse than those in Memphis and Jackson? A small neighborhood in western Detroit called Warrendale, where 23,000 people live. This hood's way out near Dearborn and Dearborn Heights. If you know Detroit, you know where I'm talking about. This is the 2nd most dangerous, the 8th most out of work, and the cheapest place you can live. And by cheap, I'm talking homes that average about $40,000 a piece. Yes, every single house here sells for what you paid for a car. This home here is going for about $29,000, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that it's going to be sold and torn down. 1 in 6 people here in Warrendale is currently out of work, but again, I'm going to assume that just about all the jobless folks here haven't worked in a long, long time. It's the most violent place you can live in the country, where you have a 1 in 19 chance of being shot, stabbed, beaten, or raped. And I'm going to go ahead and assume that most of that is gang and drug related. We've heard this story before. This was once a great place to live. Actually, for a long time, the city of Detroit had a law that police officers had to live in Detroit city limits. And there were hundreds of cops that lived here in Warrendale. But then Detroit said cops didn't have to live in Detroit proper. So just about all the cops left and fled for the hills, and the criminals and blight moved into this neighborhood. They are trying hard here. They've already torn down more than 800 houses so far, and property values are sort of going up. And apparently, Warrendale residents are very vocal and involved in trying to get this place back on its feet. One resident said, "I'm not going to say it's good, but it's improving. We've been through the worst, I think." And amen to that. Bad. Hoods. That's right. Bad. Hoods. Ghetto is what you want, then ghetto is what we're getting. Wow. How? Wow. How? These people, they want something just like you do. These people, they need something to provide to them. These people, they want something just like you do. These people, they need something to provide to them. you've seen, you've been into, Nicetown-Tioga up there a little bit, and you have some perspective. Can you kind of tell people what it's like up in that neighborhood of Philadelphia?
All right. Well, when you look at it, when you look at Nicetown-Tioga, it's not inviting at all when you look at it. But I would say that most of the people there, they're actually good people. They're just impoverished, and most of the people have plans to try and get out of their situations that they're currently in. But that community has been so um, disenfranchised, and divestment has happened for so long in that community where, you know, it's really kind of hard to find a way out, So the only things that people kind of use in order to survive is, government assistance, welfare, crime. Most of the crimes are financially related, you know. If you mind your business and you are just going to work, you know, and you're just not in the streets or anything like that, you really don't have much to worry about. But I wouldn't advise you to just be out, after dark without anybody else around you to assist you and help you out in case things go wrong and things like that. I mean, there are some infrastructure projects that are happening over there. I don't currently live there right now, but I was there in that area about a month ago, and a few things have changed, but a lot of the things have been the same since like the 80s. I used to go there and visit. My mom had a friend that lived in that area, and we used to go down there and visit. And a lot of the things are still the same. Like, the row houses are still there, halfway torn down and things like that. So, yeah, it's unfortunate. But the people there, if you mind your business and you do what you are supposed to do, and you don't cause any trouble, and you're not in that crowd that causes that small element that causes all the crimes and things like that, then you should be okay for the most part.
Yeah. So like what are people's plans? Like people have plans to get out, but they get stuck there. Is it like are the opportunities limited for people to like kind of get a good job to get on their feet to like move away? Is that primarily what's holding people back is just jobs?
Jobs and good paying jobs. I mean, you can find a job, but you're not gonna find necessarily a good paying job, and a lot of the jobs are not in the area anymore. They're in like the suburbs. There are some jobs that are, projects that are coming up that they are able to have like jobs in the area. Like there's a place called Progress Plaza, which is kind of down like south on Broad Street, and there's like a fresh grocer that's there, and that has brought some jobs into the neighborhood. Of course, you can get hired at Temple if you have the education, but a lot of those jobs are taken by people that are not from the area, and they have a higher level of education, and of course that not Nicetown-Tioga, but around Temple is being gentrified a lot. So you see a lot of people that aren't from the area mixing with people that have been in the area for generations. And, it's like there's not a lot of good interactions between those people where maybe the people with the jobs can help connect some of the people that have been there for a longer time with good paying jobs. So people are still kind of stuck with having to catch 2 and 3 buses to maybe a low paying job.
Is it is most of the crime just is it drug related most of the time between this block's trying to sell and this block's trying to sell and they get into it like that? Or is it is it like a lot of property crimes where people are stealing for drugs? I mean, how much of it's drug related, I guess, is my question.
I think a lot of it is drug related. I don't live there right now, but it definitely was drug related, like when crack cocaine was like a big deal. But now it's just, Philadelphia doesn't have a whole lot of gangs per se. It's like neighborhood type gangs, but the gangs aren't that big in Philly like they are in like California and things like that. But it's more like neighborhood rivalries. You're from this street, and I'm from this street, and Yeah, you're in our territory, so yeah, that would be drug related.
There's a neighborhood in Jackson that came up as one of the top 5 worst neighborhoods you could live in. It's in the southwest part of town. You were just there. What does it look like in some of these neighborhoods in Jackson? Is it just straight up falling down buildings and just a lot of people walking around with that look like they're up to no good, just like any other hood?
It's not so much of that. It's more like it's just dangerous. Like there's spots like clubs where people gather, or like places where people do stuff. It seems more like more action, you know. Like Memphis feels like more of a neighborhood type of vibe, where Jackson is more of like their spots where they get hot and people just pop off. And I mean, if you look at those murder rates, I can't even imagine. Like Montgomery is like a fraction of their murder rate, and there's neighborhoods where on a Friday night it's gonna pop off, no matter what. Like that night where when I did that video where they were shooting and stuff, I knew that was gonna happen because it's a Saturday night. That's what happens. I can't even imagine the murder rate of Jackson, how much more propensity there is for something to just go wrong. It's insane. I mean, I don't know how the people that live there, they must have some type of psychological stress disorder from living in that environment.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, you hear gunshots every 20 minutes, it just must not be very, very fun, nor safe. I don't know what's going to happen with Jackson. It's just like in Chicago, they just sort of just have areas of town that even the police don't even really go into. If they do go in there, they pretty much go in with their windows rolled up, take a report real quick, and then leave.
And I used to carry a handgun, and I was like, forget about it. I stepped up to like a machine gun because I'm like, it's basically like an AR rifle that shoots shotgun, not even like regular bullets. It shoots shotgun shells because it expands to where like if I feel like if a bunch of people are trying to attack me, and that's the type of stuff you got to carry to go to town. It's insane. Like, I don't know what's going on in this country right now, but it is scary to live in these cities in the South. And the people deserve better because there's good people. I mean, the saddest part is that these places, Memphis, Jackson, Montgomery, all these places in the South, there are so many good people in these places trying to raise their families, and they have to do it in an environment that is so dangerous. It's just not fair to them. The world's it's in a bad stage right now. There's so much civil unrest. People are clicking up by race in both of these cities and in the South, to where to get employment, to get, if you do get the job, you may not get trained properly. It's pretty sad to be out there right now. It's depressing at times.
Does the Black community there feel like disenfranchised, almost to the point that they've been essentially pushed away into the corner and forgotten about? Because I just did in Houston, there's a community there that feels like they were put down in the south end of town, and it's unfair the way that they've been treated. Is that kind of how it is up in the Philly neighborhoods too?
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah, Philly it's very diverse, but it's extremely segregated, and most of that segregation happened because of like redlining and things like that. Even if you did buy a property in a place like Germantown, if there were a lot of African Americans in that neighborhood, your property would automatically be devalued. And yeah, that is rampant in Philadelphia, and it still happens now. And the Black community definitely does feel forgotten. And it looks like you can just look at it and tell that it has been forgotten.
So how do you fix that problem? Like, is it like electing people that can change that, or changing people's mindsets, or what?
I think the whole system needs an overhaul, because whether or not they're Republican or Democrat, even though Philly hasn't had a Republican mayor in forever, but the policies they're all kind of the same, and it's all about doing things that kind of take money away from the community, closing down schools, taking away rec centers, closing down parks. There's nothing. And okay, there are some things called opportunity zones that they have, but a lot of those things they give tax breaks to like the corporations and things that come in there and buy a property and things. But a lot of that it drives up the cost so much where the people can't afford to live there, and so they drive the people that have been there for generations out, and then new people move in, and then the neighborhood automatically becomes fixed. You see that around University of Pennsylvania, Temple, the immediate area around South Street, and other areas where it's a dividing line, and the dividing line is kind of getting bigger as the gentrifiers go further and further into the community and push the original people out. So yeah, I would say the whole system needs to be overhauled, because no matter who's in office, the same thing kind of just goes on day after day after day, year after year, decade after decade. And yeah, people need to become more politically active, because people kind of have lost hope in they don't become politically active because they think that it doesn't do anything, and for the most part it doesn't. I'm an active voter, but I haven't seen a lot of changes happen at all, even though I do vote. And it doesn't matter the political party. It seems like they're all in the same type of game, as far as just forgetting about the African American community in Philly, which is very large. So
Yeah. What would you do if you were in charge? What would you do to change things?
ooh. What would I do to change things? All right, well, I would. Okay, this is idealistic, right? So I would have to get rid of all the corruption, because there's money going into the city, but it's not going to where it needs to go to. I would try and get rid of all the corruption, and that means a complete overhaul of the entire city of Philadelphia government, and rebuild schools, try and bring jobs, the original jobs that the people moved there for, back into the communities, and give the people that live there a chance to own things in their own community. Like, it's so crazy how in Philly and other areas, you have large African American communities, but nobody owns anything except for a barbershop and a church. And like, everything else is owned by other people, and that's one thing that's very frustrating. So I would give them opportunities to own their own businesses, because everyone that I know there, especially the male population, they want to be entrepreneurs. They're tired of working for other people, and they're tired of seeing other people that come into the community take over their community as far as financially, and then do nothing to help them in return. So
Yeah, no, I get you. So this is just a question like I don't know the answer to, so I'm asking just naively. So when you say like Black communities only own like a church and a barbershop, is there other rules in place, or is it just difficult for Black folks to like own businesses that they, or I mean, why is that you feel that like everybody else owns businesses except like the African American communities? Why is that, you think?
I really don't know, because I would say, because, well, I know historically, the African American community has been denied bank loans and things like that, and they've been discriminated against with regard to getting loans and grants and things of that nature. And I know that I don't live in Philly. I live in Reading right now, which is, I heard you talk about Reading before too. And it's my church was trying to open up some sort of daycare center in the city of Reading, and they were given the hardest time trying to open up a bit like this daycare center. But meanwhile, you'll have a lot of bodegas in the area that are drug fronts. I grew up in Reading, which is an hour from Philly, and this happens all over, at least the Northeast. Where I grew up, going to a bodega, and the food was always expired. The gum was always stale, and everyone used to get their drugs from there. And um, why do the people that I know that are trying to open up a business that are African American have to go through all these hoops and hurdles to try and fit all these regulations, which I agree with, but you don't hold everyone else to that same standard, you know? And it's just a bunch of other things. I mean, I don't know, the United States, they treat their, and I don't think it's just Black Americans, it's just Americans in general that have been here. Like, they don't give a lot of people that have been here as many opportunities as newcomers. And I think there's a lot to that. Maybe there's something that the United States may have done to the country. There are other countries that the people are coming from that they're paying them back, or maybe the people are self-selected when they come over here as far as immigrants and things like that. But the native population here is just kind of forgotten about, especially the native Black American population. So I don't know why exactly that is, but it seems to have been that way since I've been alive.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, so you still feel there's discriminatory practices going on with banks and the way the rules are written, even to this day, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you hear the opposite sometimes from people that are like, you know, folks of color get like the benefit of the doubt. They get pushed forward in schools. They get like opportunities for scholarships. There's loans set aside just for people of color. But like you're saying that like that doesn't always apply across the board. Like you're not seeing that where you're at.
No. I'm not seeing that for non-immigrant Black Americans. You know what I mean? Like there are benefits for people that are that I've seen to open up businesses and things like that for people that are foreign Black Americans. But if you're a native Black American and you've been here for generations, the opportunities for you to progress are very, very limited as far as if you want to use the government. And so people have kind of given up on that, unfortunately. Yeah.
Do you feel like Joe Biden's administration is going to change that, or any administration is going to change that? Like, do you see any political inroads to from what you're seeing or hearing? Is there hope that stuff's going to change, or how will that change?
I think that the change is going to have to happen from the ground up. It's going to have to come from the people. The people are going to have to organize in some kind of way and fight for what they want, because I don't think we're going to get anything from Joe Biden, Donald Trump, any president or anybody that's already at the top that is designated to be our so-called leaders. I mean, we've seen things stay the same for the past at least 50 years, you know, ever since I don't know, I'd say after the civil rights movement and things like that, things have kind of stayed stagnant and gone down, you know, and nobody has really been committed to really changing anything. They just kind of want to maintain this status quo, and it's just kind of getting everybody is hurting because of it, you know. So no, I don't think that any political leader is I think we should still be involved, and we still have to let our voices be heard and known and things like that. But the real change is going to happen from, you know, from the population itself, understanding its history and understanding how things work, and fighting for change.
Mm-hmm. And like, I don't really understand like the BLM movement from except for what I see on TV and what you hear people talk about. I don't know anybody that's involved in that, but is that part of the change that you say needs to happen? Is that part of the movement? Is BLM itself? Are they trying to do some of the things that you're talking about?
I don't think BLM is. There are other organizations out there that are, but I don't necessarily trust BLM. One controversial group that I've been following is called the American Descendants of Slavery Movement, which is the ADOS movement led by Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore. And they're on YouTube, and they talk about like giving reparations to Native Black Americans in the United States. And I think that once, I agree with that. Like at first I didn't at first, but they laid out like everything that, the population have. I'm a Native Black American. I don't, even though my name is Ricardo, I'm not an immigrant. Like a lot of people seem to think that I am, but given everything that they've laid out, I can definitely see why one aspect to changing the way things are in America right now is to give the descendants of American slavery reparations for, the work that they've done to build this country, but BLM, I'm not necessarily a supporter of Black Lives Matter. I like the slogan, but the organization itself, I'm not necessarily a supporter of. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, man. Well, we took this way beyond what's a neighborhood in Philly like. That was a good conversation. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I like learning from people's points of view, and I just ask questions. I have no agenda. I just have a question, and you had some good answers. So I appreciate that, man.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Thank you for interviewing me.
So what's the solution to fixing Southside Chicago?
That's a tricky question. Officer is the first line leader of the government that you see, that you interact with as the government. But who's past that? Well, there's a slew of positions and people past that. Probation officers, sheriff's deputies work in the jail, elected judges, prosecutors, et cetera, et cetera. They're all part of the criminal justice system. If people want to fix this nation or take a step in the right direction, you can't attack the police. They're the middleman. They've taken a beating for so long. You want to talk about why crime's going up 100% in every category in these major cities? The police can't win. Who wants to do that job anymore? You have to hold the elected state's attorney accountable for prosecuting shit. If they don't want to prosecute anything, what do you think happens? Criminals get emboldened, and they're going to commit more crime. They're going to commit more bullshit.
Yeah. Well, so all right. Well, I mean, the Englewood in particular, that's how we got started on this. It's a very clearly, one of the worst places in the country. It's out of control. A lot of it's drugs. A lot of it's just low lives that have nothing to do but sell the drugs, right?
It is entire. So let's backtrack a little bit. So when Chicago got rid of Cabrini Green, there was a dispersion of the populace, and there was hardcore gangs in Cabrini Green when Chicago tore the towers down. What that did was the people living there didn't really have any other options. They were accustomed to already being in a gang. It was a way of life. So when you disperse that populace, you just galvanized that controlling power, and that splintered into a multitude of different gangs throughout the city and really the nation. So the South Side is a multitude of gangs, and it goes. Yes, you could say gangster disciples, black P-stones, traveling vice lords, but it's really block by block. Hey, where you from? Well, what street do you live on? And the cartels, since these controlling factions are already established, it's easier from a business standpoint of view if you're intelligent, really, and you're running narcotics for the cartel. It's easier to instead provide those narcotics to an already established infrastructure / organization, as loose as it may be, street by street. It's easier to provide narcotics to them than to do it yourself and try to start a war and take over that territory. So yes, a lot of the problems is supplied by narcotics. It's the South American cartels, the Mexican cartels, They bring narcotics up. They deliver it to these Chicago gangs. And through the selling of narcotics and other petty bullshit, not that narcotics isn't petty, but selling of narcotics and other petty bullshit, yeah, a lot of violence happens. And sometimes it's not related to those things, but yeah, that's most of it.
No, but I guess I'm just, trying to think of then clearly there's no easy solution. So do you see like areas like Englewood getting even worse and worse, or are we at the worst it can possibly get?
I don't know. Nick, that's a really good question. I don't know if it can get worse. I think we've reached that singularity where you can't really help it. But I don't know if it's going to get worse. I mean, when I was there, it was nonstop. And I know it still is because I'm still in communication with a lot of guys I used to work with and gals. And they don't even have time to try to do anything proactive, nor should they, because they'll just get hemmed up administratively somehow. But they're responding call to 911 call after another. Hundreds of homicides. Well, the Chicago. You ever heard of a clearance rate?
No.
Clearance rate is something in a city where it's the amount of cleared crime. It's the amount of solved crime. So Chicago's homicide clearance rate is around 20%, which means you can get away with homicide 80% of the time in Chicago. Yeah, we're at a very volatile time in our country's history right now.
Is this kind of stuff going to spill into, suburbia safe as opposed to where the inner cities are, where you've got like traditional crime? I mean, are all the folks that are fleeing going to be hit by this eventually? Is it going to make its way into that, or is it just going to stay in the inner cities?
Nick, it's gonna reach out and touch everybody. Nowhere is sacred anymore.
Hey guys, so if anything I just talked about upset you or made you sad or mad, well then do something about it. Call your local leaders and demand change. Chip in and help those in need. Make your community better, because communities don't get better without hard work and determination. America's a great place. It just needs some more love and pride.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.
And are you looking to move and need advice? I do consulting. That's right. I'll sit down and talk about where the next perfect place for you and your family should be. I do it all the time. Together, let's find you a new home that's safe and checks all your boxes. You can get my email in the description to find out how I can help you find your perfect relocation. And I can also help you find your new house, too. Email me and I'll work with you on not just helping you figure out where to move, but I can help you find your perfect home, too. That's right. Someone's a realtor now. Who wants to deal with a realtor they don't know when you can have me help you, right?